Yes. I had to debug one minor thing, which was it wasn't reading the file correctly, so I had to make a small edit.
Okay.
Until I was looking for the text file.
Okay.
So it can read from command and line prompt, but it always looks back to what is saved in the Eclipse folder.
Okay.
If it exists.
If you don't have a command line, right? A prompt.
Right.
Okay, cool, perfect.
And if all else fails, it will either look for a hard copy on the desktop, or it will break through the program.
Okay, sounds good. So not a lot of people here, so we can work in groups of probably 2 people each. We're going to work on the board today, playing around with decision trees, updating them, traversing them, and then writing them to a file and reading them back in. Any questions before we go on to that, though? Questions on midterm, PA4, PA3, future of the universe, anything?
I had a question.
Yeah.
If you mentioned something, if people didn't save their program like in Java 8 or 9, you had to make some changes on that.
Yeah.
Did you let them know about that?
Not always, no.
Okay. Because I already had Eclipse installed, so then I installed Java 9, and
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that I did submit it right.
Okay. I was able to read it even if it was something
Okay.
other than 8 or 9. So if you didn't deliberately set it up anyway, I would say just leave it how it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I switched it to it, but.
Okay.
On the PA2 document, it said, I think it said the JDK had to be 8 or 9, but on Eclipse it talks about the JRE, or that's something I could find to change.
Yeah, Eclipse is a little weird.
So I changed that to 1.8, I think.
Okay. Did I give you a comment on the submission about version numbers?
It was okay.
Okay. The real gotcha was, like I said, if you included things like SWT or things like that, that is a little harder to get through. But let me show you how you can tweak these things, because if you keep using Eclipse, you'll need to deal with these things sooner or later anyway. And I've sort of gotten pretty good at doing this, but not necessarily. So let's just open, I don't know, just open something at random.
Draw stuff.
Draw stuff, that sounds good.
Sounds like the drawing program you implemented.
Let's see what it does. Don't ever run code that you don't know what it does. Oh, that's cool.
Oh, that is kind of cool. It's changing color.
Wow, yeah. It's the weird Etch-a-Sketch. All right, so so if you right-click on the project itself and go to Properties, you get all these options, and the 2 ones that mostly seem to relate to version numbers is Java Compiler, and so compliance is basically, my interpretation of it, it's basically saying what level of Java does it want, right? What's the version number. And this says JDK compliance. So it's checked right now. I use compliance from the execution environment 1.8. We're fine. If I uncheck that, I can set it explicitly 1.8, 9, 10, and there's other options available for newer versions of Eclipse. But 1.8 is probably fine right there. And then the other option is Java build path. And here it takes some multiple clicking around, but mostly in libraries. If I click on this, which is 1.8, I can say edit. And I can specify an alternate JRE, and if I select that, I can choose either my OpenJDK or something called Real, which is the default one. But if you have other versions of Java installed, those should show up under here. Installed JREs will show me the ones that it knows about. And I can usually just go with Workspace default. And some of these, it'll say it has to rebuild the project, and you can let it rebuild. And then that should bring everything into the right version number. What's my new button do? Doesn't do anything.
That's what I did, so I think it should be fine.
Okay.
I just enjoy the randomness of the color.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not too bad to do. So I set the color based on the X and Y coordinates. And I just calculate them modulo 256. So as you go from left to right, the color should, the amount of red should increase and then roll back to 0. And when you go from top to bottom, the amount of green, and then there's no blue anywhere. So there's green. It keeps resetting like that. And if you come down here, it'll do something different.
That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's way too much fun. All right, so other questions?
EA5?
PA5 is going to be on client server models and networking and sockets. And we're going to start talking about the details of that next week. And I haven't completely decided if we're going to do a chat program or we're going to do a battleship game or something like that. But it'll be something involving communication between multiple programs or multiple machines using some networking ideas. And it'll be fun, whatever it is. I'll try to make sure. All right, so I want to get some practice with decision trees. And so go ahead and find a spot on the board. Like I say, I think we got 9 people in here. So let's do 4 groups, mostly groups of 2, and 1 group can have 3 people. Find a spot on the board and find an eraser and a good marker, and let's start building some trees and updating them. All right, so I'm going to show you the contents of a database file, but I'm going to try to save space. So I'm actually going to list the question Q colon followed by the question on 1 line instead of 2. Okay, this is just a shorthand. So let's just start with our sort of standard. And I'm going to turn off the recording on this because it's not going to be interesting because you're going to be doing all the work. All right.
I understand the confusion.
So you can go ahead and sit back down if you like. I think you got the idea of this. Any questions about this? Any part of the process?
Sorry, didn't want to slide.
So, you know how to read from a file, right? You can open a scanner, and instead of constructing the scanner on system.in, you can do something like scanner sc. sc equals new scanner. And you can say new file, whatever you call it, database.txt or whatever. And then sc works like a scanner from standard in. You can do sc.hasNextLine, sc.nextLine to pull in line by line. And the only trick is this can potentially throw an exception if that file doesn't exist or you don't have access to it. So this all has to go inside a try-catch block. And if you come out of that try block successfully, then you can go ahead and use sc.nextLine, sc.hasNextLine, and so on and so forth. This is just creating an object of type file, okay? So it's not actually changing the file. In fact, this doesn't even have to exist to do this. So if the file exists, that won't actually change it.
So in our catch, we're assuming if the file doesn't exist, we would have to create it?
If the file doesn't exist in your case, then
Do we even handle that?
just say file doesn't exist and exit.
Okay, but we don't actually go through the program and like start with the base page?
No, you don't have to start with an empty file. So, so you can assume that I'm going to run this with a command line argument, which will be a valid database file.
Okay.
And if you're doing this for your own testing and you don't want to keep specifying a command line argument, right, just specify a default database and that can be the one that you run with. And you can assume it always exists. And you can go ahead and assume it's valid. I'm not going to throw a corrupted file at you. When you do this, make sure you don't declare SC inside the try block. Declare it outside. If you declare it inside the try block, once they get out of here, SC doesn't exist anymore. It's local to that block. So declare it up here and then make a try block to try to construct the new scanner. So the input you've already done before, right? You did this on the midterm, you did this in PA2, and so on. So let's talk about the output side. So for the output, easiest way is probably a print writer. So java.io.printWriter. So construct new print writer, and the argument can be a new file. And here you can put in the path to whatever file you want to create. I recommend a full path, unless you know where the default directory is, which is somewhere in your Eclipse build path. So print writer pw equals new print writer, new file. I'll just call it hahaha.txt. And then you can say pw.println. And all the stuff you can do with system.out.println, you can do with a printwriter.println. So you can concatenate things together and it'll call toString and so on and so forth. But in fact, all you're going to do is basically write out Q:, A:, or a text field from your node, or that you got from the user. So this is pretty straightforward, but again, you need a try catch block. If you try to compile it, it'll complain that the print writer could throw an exception. You have to import file also. So it'll say you could get a file not found exception, so you need try catch logic around here. Alright, so I'll just print an error message, I'll show what the exception is, and I'll kick out of there. And then this is what I just described. If you do that, print writer is an undefined object because I declared it inside the try block. So, really easy mistake to make, really easy to rectify. Just declare this outside and then get rid of the declaration that's inside. Now PW is defined as part of this main method, and I give it a value in the try block, and then I can use that value outside. If you need to have access to PW in other methods, you can either pass it to those methods or make it a class variable, whatever makes the most sense for your setup. So if we compile this, that should compile fine. If we run it, we can cat the file, and it's got nothing in it, and why is that? Because you didn't close it. I didn't close it, it's my bad. let's compile it, let's run it. Let's look at ha, there you go. And if something happens, like you have no write access to that file, and you run, you'll get a corresponding error message. So in my catch block, I said I can't open it, and there's the exception I found. And it gave me an exception of type file not found exception, but it says permission denied. So that's just what it calls it. And if a file already exists, right, and you run your code, it'll just overwrite it without comment. So don't use your like precious.java code or your resume or something for the database to see what it does, because it'll just overwrite it. All right, so really easy to do output. One possible gotcha to be aware of, if you do this on a Windows machine, and you look at the resulting file in Notepad, it may end up all being strung out on one line, right? Because there's this difference between Windows and Unix. Unix uses a / and a new line for the end of line. Windows uses a carriage return followed by a new line. And newer programs like WordPad will understand if there's just a new line, it'll pretend that it's an end of line. Notepad doesn't, so it'll just string them all out on one line, and it looks kind of weird. All right, you got everything you need to do PA4, right? You know the algorithm, you know how to play the game, you know how to update the tree if the answer is wrong, you know how to write it to file, you know how to read it back in from the file, you know how to do file input and file output using scanner and print writer with the file constructor. Those are all the pieces, right? So you got everything you need to be able to write and finish PA4. Tackle it in pieces, right? But you should be good to go. All right, so I will see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we will start talking more about multi-threaded processing in Java. We'll learn how to create multiple threads, and we'll play around with those, and it'll be really cool. All right, see you tomorrow.